Trump administration isn't looking for war with Iran, but they're not shrinking from it either. I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. And Bill, a carrier strike group and a bomber task force has been sent to U.S. Central Command somewhere in the Middle East region in response to what Trump administration officials, Secretary of State, National Security Advisor Bolton, are referring to as escalatory actions by Iran, although they're not specifying what those escalatory actions are. The United States military already has a strong presence in the Middle East, and actually the Trump administration had pulled out. We used to always have a carrier strike group in that region, and he stopped doing that regular patrol. Let me just ask, as somebody who's a student of military history and pays attention to these things, what do you think of what you're hearing now from Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and the National Security Advisor John Bolton?
I think that sending a United States carrier strike group to the Persian Gulf significantly reduces the chance of war. And I think if we sent 3 of them, we would reduce the chance of war by a factor of 3.
And what makes you say that? Because, clearly this is an escalation in response to what they say are escalations that we have not seen.
I've been able to summarize my understanding of military history throughout all of history. I don't mean just modern history or American history. I mean all of human history. I've looked at it. And the way I'm able to boil down the data is that the surest way to get into a war is to be weak or to appear weak. The second surest way is to act like nobody can beat you. But the appearance of weakness is without question what causes virtually all of the conflicts throughout history. Especially when you're dealing with a regime like Iran, but you don't have this problem when you're dealing with democratic regimes. A democracy has never gone to war with another democracy in the history of the world. So we're dealing with bullies and tyrants, and you take those pejorative terms away. Let's just say, okay, I've written him off. He's a lunatic hawk. Let me just rephrase them in terms that may be a little more palatable to you because they have a little more science behind them, but they're still bullies and thugs. There are cooperation-based societies like ours, and there are dominance-based societies like Iran's. In a cooperation-based society, the purpose of a goodwill gesture is to increase confidence on both sides. In a dominance-based society, a goodwill gesture is seen as a sign of weakness, which destabilizes the situation, not ensures it.
Can I ask you to clarify that a little bit and
Sure.
on this basis? Because you're using the term society, but I remember a time not so long ago when Iran wasn't under the rule of this cabal of mullahs and had a much different society. Are you really talking about governments, or are you talking about the peoples as a whole?
No, I'm definitely talking about governance.
Okay.
There's no question. I'm not talking about them. I don't believe there's a racial component of any kind to this. I really don't. In fact, there's superb evidence that there isn't, because prior to World War II, it was generally believed that the Japanese are just, kind of subhuman militaristic animals, and that's all they could handle. When in point of fact that since their utter defeat in World War II, the Japanese have become one of the most, well, not one of, if perhaps maybe the most law-abiding, genuinely democratic, corruption-free, powerful economies in the world. So it's got nothing to do with that. It's not like the yellow peril out there who are never going to figure it out. It's a question of society. Now, with that said, it's not something you can just change like a shirt. I mean, it goes very deep into the culture, and this is one of the lessons we learned about our situation in Iraq. But let's go back to Iran. Their natural inclination is to assume that anybody who makes a gesture of weakness, and either that's an offer of friendship, or if I hit somebody on the shoulder and they don't hit me back, then that is, it's irresistible bait for me to hit them harder. And if they don't hit back harder than I hit them, if they keep coming back with a smaller or even equivalent response, I'm going to want to find out where that response is. And after a couple of these pounds on the shoulder, they will lose all respect for you as an adversary. And at that point, it's just a matter of time until the actual conflict starts. So the way to avoid a full-on shooting war with Iran is to put significant U.S. forces in the area. And this part is critical. You have to make sure that you are legally in the right. In other words, if you have to know that if you are in international waters, you better be damn sure you're in international waters if you're talking about what I'm talking about. And certainly my experience in limited amount of time with naval officers, both at rank of admiral and rank of commanders of individual submarines and destroyers, these are the most professional people I've ever met. So my point is, you put a carrier battle group out into the Persian Gulf, and if Iranian ships come and harass you in a threatening way that is considered to be hostile intent, sink them, and then see what happens. And this is how you will train these people to know that despite the 8 years that preceded 2016, we're not on your side. And more importantly, they know we're not on our side. We're not the weaklings that you think we are. This is something that I've learned an awful lot of about history of democracies, and it was true with Athens and many others, but especially true with the United States because of our fundamental decency. Time and time and time again, people have looked at the friendly, outgoing nature of Americans, and Americans love fun and they love comfort. We're not a terribly serious people. I'm married to a Russian. Those are serious people. We're pretty much happy-go-lucky, kind of fun-loving guys. And people around the world tend to think that that means that we're just a bunch of weak little kids. And again and again and again and again and again, they find out that that's not the case, that underneath all of this fun and happiness is an iron will to defend it. And if you don't want to get to that point, and I don't want to get to the point where we're in a full-scale war, the way you avoid that is to make it crystal clear to these people, whoever the adversary is, make it crystal clear to them that the next time they try to tap you on the arm or knock something off your shoulder, you're going to hit them back very hard. And if they do it again, you're going to knock them out.
Here's the exact statement I'll
that's how
read
it works.
from, this is from the United States. The United States is not seeking, I believe John Bolton, the National Security Advisor, released this statement. The United States is not seeking war with the Iranian regime, but we are fully prepared to respond to any attack, whether by proxy, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or regular Iranian forces. And later, it was echoed by a defense official who didn't want to go on the record that Iranian forces and proxies were making preparations for a possible attack against U.S. forces in the region. Bill, I can just hear people who were concerned when they heard that John Bolton was going to have a prominent defense position in the Trump administration saying, well, there he goes, doing exactly what we said he would do.
Thank God.
I don't think they end their sentence with thank God.
Well, they don't end their sentence with thank God because they don't understand how the world works. They don't understand history. And mostly, let's just cut to the chase here. Let's just cut right straight to the chase. People who think that an act of strength in regards to somebody who is not your friend, people who think that that's going to start a war, are people who don't understand human nature, don't understand bullies, and are filled with personal cowardice. And I was one of those people too. You know, I didn't want to get in a fight at school. Somebody goes, see you at the water tower at 3:00. I lived in perpetual fear of this because I was a skinny weakling. But what I've learned through thousands of years of history is pretty much invariably this is wrong. And if I'd learned my history before I had gotten out of third grade, I would have understood the simple truth that many people understand, and that is if a bully comes up to you and starts pushing you around, you must immediately hit them in the nose as hard as you can because they are not looking to beat you up. They're testing you to see if you're weak. And that's why when you hit a bully back, the bully doesn't pound you into the sand. You hit a bully back, the bully backs off. You have deactivated him. He's not interested in a fight. He's interested in weakness. He's interested in finding out where you are going to make a stand, if anywhere. And this is the result of people not understanding human nature and wishful thinking and all the rest of it. It's also a result of mirroring, which is the left's. Well, needless to say, the left is superb at mirroring because they're so narcissistic. But mirroring is the idea that other cultures function exactly the same way as we do. So if we're going to deal with Iran, we should deal with Iran the way that we'd like to be dealt with ourselves. And mirroring is a very good plan when you're dealing with cooperative societies like Canada, let's say. We don't have to intimidate Canada. We don't have to put troops against the border in Canada. We can make a nice deal to Canada. Canada make a nice deal back. We're friends. So we understand each other. But to say that treating the Iranians the same way you treat the Canadians, well, that's just nuts. And that's nuts from people who don't who don't understand human nature. They're so filled with themselves that they think that the world revolves around them. And this is what they're basically saying. They're saying, well, if we send a carrier battle group over there, then our presence will incite them to war. As if they don't have an agenda of their own. Iranian culture is 4,000 years old. Our culture is 250 years old. They've had an agenda before the word agenda existed. They've had an agenda before the English language existed. They had an agenda before Jesus Christ walked the earth. And to say that all of a sudden we're going to make them do something that they didn't want to do because we sail a boat into international waters is racism and stupidity. And I'm neither one of those, racist or stupid. And neither is the people that make up the military, and neither is Donald Trump, and neither is John Bolton, which is why this is a sign of increasing long-term peace. And that doesn't mean that there may not be incidents. And the incidents, if there is a shooting incident, look, it takes an awful lot of imagination and an awful lot of ignorance for you to sit there in your hot tub sipping your Chardonnay and think that in a conflict between the United States of America and the Islamic Republic of Iran, or whatever name they slapped on that thugocracy, you've got a pretty big hole in your education if you think that this is going to be an even fight or a fair fight. If you think that they are as afraid of us as we are of them, or we should be as afraid of them as they are of us, you got another thing coming. They get away with murder, not figurative murder, actual murder. They get away with murder on pretty much a daily basis because they have been convinced by our inaction that they can get away with it. And now it's time to show them that they can't.
So Secretary of State Pompeo and John Bolton seem to be not only standing shoulder to shoulder on this, but Pompeo kind of amped it up a little bit and basically said, we are going to hold the Iranian government responsible for actions by proxies. I'll read the direct quote. If these actions take place, if they do by some third-party proxy, a militia group, Hezbollah, we will hold the Iranian leadership directly accountable for that. Doesn't that put the Iranian government in a position of having to control entities which may be, I'm not saying they're not inspired by or funded by them, but maybe
Scott,
beyond their
yes.
control?
Congratulations. Now, I'm talking to devil's advocate, Scott, not the real Scott, who's an incredibly astute person, but the character that you play on TV, Scott. Yes, congratulations. You've woken up. You've made the mental breakthrough that is not really so difficult to make. The reason that there is Hezbollah is because it allows Iran to do things with plausible deniability. It allows Iran to carry out actions, terrorism, all these other things that they would be rightfully condemned for. And because Iran is a state, there is a price that they can pay for it. But if I have some sort of non-state organization, they're my little sock puppet. I make them do whatever they want to. And if they do something horrendous and the world says, oh, look how terrible Hezbollah is, they don't see that I've got my hand in there. So what Donald Trump and the Trump administration is saying, we know who runs these puppets, and we're not gonna attack the puppet. We're gonna attack the puppeteer. And this will modify their behavior. Now, there's one thing in this that I have to say because I just know human nature well enough. I would be surprised if this worked right out of the gate. In fact, I'd be amazed. What I mean by that is, we have made so many threats and saber-rattled for so long and been in a position of weakness for so long that I find it almost inconceivable that Iran will not test this in some way. So this is something that we're going to see. And to come back to an analogy, childish analogy that everybody understands, right? This is what we're going to see. We're going to see something like this, Scott. We're going to have a bunch of kids in a station wagon that have been traveling for 18 hours and hitting each other and fighting in the back. And we had a dad who said, if you don't stop, I'm going to turn this car around. If you don't stop, I'm going to turn this car around. If you don't stop, I mean it this time. This time I'm serious. I am going to turn this car around. Okay, well, that dad is out. And now a new dad is in. And now he's saying, if this doesn't stop, I'm going to turn this car around. And if it goes on for one more time, you have to turn the car around. If Disney World is in sight, you have to go back to where you came from in order to convince your children that when you say something, you mean it.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're very aware that as we pre-record episodes like this, events may outstrip what we've been able to evaluate here. And so we try to keep it on a broader basis of just analyzing how our principles come into play with regard to situations like this. We, of course, our thoughts and prayers go to our naval officers and military people around the world, the people who are making tough decisions right now. And none of us here at BillWhittle.com want to see a shooting war, as Bill has expressed.
No, and that's why I applaud. I've already seen more examples than I can possibly list in my life of the physical courage of our military. But what we're seeing now is we're seeing moral courage on the part of our political leadership. And if you had expressed more moral courage, you wouldn't have had to take up so much physical courage and lost so many fine people. So, yes, needless to say, I echo this 100%. But I also know, having been aboard some of these vessels, that this is not something let me just wrap by saying this. There may be people in hot tubs in Santa Monica that are chattering at the teeth over this, but they're not on board submarines or destroyers. That I can assure you. Those people are ready to go where their country sends them, and they're ready to do their job, and they know what the risks are. And to say, well, we need to protect these poor little lambs. No, they're grown adults. They're patriots. They're ready to defend their country and their country's interests and the freedom of all of us, no matter how stupid we may be back at home. So if you're one of those people out there, you have my heartfelt support and gratitude. And I'm with Scott, hoping God keeps you safe and sound, every single one of you.
Now, the members of BillWhittle.com have made this show possible 5 days a week. In fact, at BillWhittle.com, there are some 44 new shows every month, plus a rich, deep archive of material that some consider classics. In addition, we are producing new classics every day. Our own members are doing this on our blog, on our member-written blog. And until you see this and read it, I don't think you can fully appreciate what has happened over the years as people who, like you, who have been listening to political commentary, who've been engaged in events, are actually becoming the producers of analysis.
And a family.
And really drawing together as a fellowship of liberty. So it's been a real kick for me to see the caliber and the abilities of all of our members. We're grateful for that.
Best people in the world.
If you would like to join the best people in the world, you can go to BillWhittle.com and click that Become a Member link. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members for making it happen.